Welcome back to the call up. It is Wednesday, December 14th. I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen. And man, we've got a big trade to talk about. We're going to also talk about prospects who can make an impact, potentially break camp with each of the big league teams that we're going to fly through. At least one notable prospect that'll break camp that has not debuted yet. But really excited to break down this Sean Murphy deal, which we promised in the last episode we were going to get into a little bit more. The trade kind of went down right as we were recording the Rule 5 draft recap. So here we are to break down this Sean Murphy deal, which is a head scratcher for a lot of people. We're going to try to make some sense of it because I think there is some little silver linings here, and then talk about a prospect that could break camp for each big league team. Jack, how much have you been wanting to talk about this Sean Murphy return a bit further? I know you talked a little bit about it on the Just Baseball show.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about trades for a long time
Mhm.
because it's been a minute since we
Mhm.
last talked about a trade, and we
Yep.
can't flex our deep cut, like it's like if you say your favorite artist is this underground rapper that four people have heard of. You can't flex your muscles when it comes to the Grammy Awards, right? We can't
No.
flex our muscles in free agency because all these guys are established big leaguers. So many
Yeah.
people know everything there is to know about these guys. Where we can really help you guys is in trades, because chances are for a big name like Sean Murphy, a guy that can contribute to a contending team, there's going to be some prospect capital going back the other way. And that's
100%.
the beauty of trade season.
And what I love about, what we have in the baseball world though is, there's more tools for fans, and that's great, right? We have MLB Pipeline, which at the end of the day is one of the best baselines that you can have because it's so visually appealing. It gives you context, and it's there's no paywall between us and I think Baseball America, or between us and MLB Pipeline. Yeah, that's really it. And obviously, MLB Pipeline's a little bit more established than us, but when it comes to free prospect content, that's about it. And MLB Pipeline goes 30 players on every team. You also have the trade machine, which I freaking hate, but it is a good baseline tool. But the trade machine's kind of tied in with that because it values it on some of the publicly available and surface level prospect rankings. I'm also leaving Fangraphs out of here as well. They are free also. But it is definitely one of those things where I'm always eager to provide more context because you're seeing people say, "Oh, well, this guy's 28th in the Brave system. Why would they want this guy?" Or this guy is only a 2.4 value in the trade machine. This is a horrible trade. I do think that they did not do great, but there's more context to be added to this whole thing.
If you want to piss us off, tweet us screenshots
Oh,
of MLB Trade Machine. It's
no.
it's funny for me. I know it gets a bit more visceral reaction from you, but I would love it. Like if you guys have the dumbest trades that like go through as
No, I
successful
encourage
on the trade
those.
machine,
I encourage the worst ones possible. Like expose that thing because you
expose
could put
that
some
thing.
crazy stuff in there.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Like Anthony Rendon having like a minus 150 value on there. Like you can trade Rendon and Otani for like
Nothing.
a middling prospect. Yeah,
Yes.
because they cancel each other out. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, like send us those crazy screenshots. And you're right. Like they do provide a service of giving you a ballpark estimate for value. And Anthony Rendon, like minus 150. Okay, that contract is immovable. We know that, and that's why that value is like that. And the top flight prospects have a higher prospect valuation on that thing than the lower level prospects. But again, you got to take that as a ballpark
Yeah.
valuation. You cannot take that as God's word.
Yeah, and I think it does a really good job on the high level prospects. Before we get into the deal, I think where there's a gap is, some of the lesser scouted prospects that from team to team, and an example in this trade would be Royber Salinas, who,
Yeah.
we'll do the full trade breakdown in a second, but, tying into this point, Salinas, who goes over to the A's in this deal, in the trade machine is going to have a very marginal value. But, when you look at what maybe the A's see Salinas as and what the Braves probably looked at him as, and, what teams who have the data on him and the numbers and have seen him throw and have scouted him, he's worth a lot more than whatever marginal value that the trade machine kind of spit out. But right now, the prospect rankings that are publicly available have not been updated to reflect that just yet. I guarantee they will be, after this trade, because people are going to hear a little bit more on these prospects that were sent over, specifically Salinas, who I think is one of the more overlooked guys in this deal. But let's go through the full breakdown here, because it's a 3-team deal that, is definitely fascinating. So the Braves get Sean Murphy. That's it, right? That's literally it. The Brewers, who come into this deal, and I think they make out the best besides the Braves, who get Sean Murphy.
Yeah.
They get William Contreras. They also get reliever Joel Payamps, and then
Yeah.
prospect Justin Yeager. They part with Esteury Ruiz, which we were just talking about. Like, where does Ruiz fit in with all of these outfielders? We're going to talk about guys that are going to debut. And the Brewers have several of them in the outfield that should debut, potentially break camp this year. So he was expendable, and now they add a guy that they think they can turn around behind the dish, who is guaranteed going to be one of their better bats immediately. And then, of course, the A's, they get Kyle Muller, they get Esteury Ruiz, they get Freddie Tarnick, a right-handed pitcher, they get Salinas, a right-handed pitcher, and then they also get Manny Pena to back up at the catching position. They gave up Sean Murphy and reliever Joel Payamps. So where do we start here? Do you want to start with the A's return and break that whole thing down, or do we quickly talk about Contreras? I know he's not a prospect really, but
Yeah.
I still consider him one in a lot of ways. And then get into, what the whole package is here for the A's.
So are you with me that we don't need to talk about Atlanta at all because they just got Sean Murphy, like
No,
they
that's
got better?
that. Yeah, we don't need it. Sean
That
Murphy is
does.
fantastic. All I'll say on Sean Murphy is I think a lot of people are aware of how good he is, but I don't think people understand that he's even better than whatever the general consensus is. Look at his home road splits. He's never even better offensive force outside of Oakland. I think he's going to continue to get better. Now he goes to a good lineup, and the defense has continued to get better as well. This guy's going to really solidify himself as a top 3 or 4 catcher in the game, I think,
Yeah.
with Atlanta. But that's pretty much all we have to say there.
Yeah. So I think we can quickly go through Milwaukee's return, and then we can hit
Yeah.
we can hit Oakland.
Yeah.
Massive prospect return.
They're already forgetting about Oakland. I mean, just to call them the A's, because I think this is really, I really do believe this is a full-fledged effort to prove that baseball can't survive in Oakland by making the team as undesirable as possible and say, oh, okay, I guess we got to move them. And I really think that's what Fisher's doing over here with this ball club. But that's for another time. That's some more just baseball show stuff. But we'll start with Yeager because it's quick. But Justin Yeager was unprotected in the Rule 5. Didn't get selected. So it kind of gives you a context of his value. Doesn't mean he's not a good arm, and I do think he has some good left-handed or some good right-handed reliever upside, fastball that sits at 96 and a good slider in the upper 80s. Both generated a lot of whiff. He struggled with command, but struck out 37% of batters last year. So, I think you're hoping you get a 6'4" righty reliever here. He's going to be 25 by the time the season starts, but not a bad, flyer prospect to get thrown in there if you're the Brewers, who, I would have done it for William Contreras straight up. They get a middle reliever in Payamps and Yeager, who has a chance to be a high leverage reliever with the quality of stuff. It's just, how does it develop? I don't think you have much to add on Yeager, right? You want to just get into Contreras?
Yeah, I don't have much to add on Yeager. Real quick on Joel Payamps. This guy is, bigger guy, 6'2", 225. He pitches like that. 28 years old. He's going to be 29 on opening day, if I'm not mistaken. 41 appearances between Kansas City and Oakland, and those are 2 bad bullpens this past year. Yeah. And he put together an ERA in the low 3s. Yeah. He's not a strikeout guy, 6.5 Ks per 9. What he is a ground ball guy. Over a 50% ground ball rate roll. So he stays
that works in Milwaukee.
It works in Milwaukee big time. Those are the guys that they need. You needed protection for Devin Williams now that Hader is gone. And I think that they just got it with Payamps. But the big thing is they've got a guy to throw to now, especially with Narvaez on the open market and William Contreras. How do you feel about his ability to stick behind the plate for a full season? Like, as a primary catcher, do you enjoy the idea of William Contreras?
No. But I think that question was a little loaded, right? Because and I know why you loaded it that way. No, and I think you're gonna have to give up more than Esteury Ruiz if William Contreras is a competent defensive catcher for 162 because of what he did offensively. That said, I think down the line, he's not even 25 yet. Down the line, I do believe that Contreras can be a good defensive catcher. This guy is a good athlete. He's got the tools. We've seen what his brother can do too. And I know his brother's not the best defender in the world, but I was already reading some of the things that the Brewers front office said. They felt very optimistic that they can, develop him as a defensive catcher. And here's the thing, man, like he's such a good hitter. And this was a team that if there was one team that could use the offensive minded catcher as much as anybody, it's the Brewers, who just need bats in any way, right? I mean, they're returning Willy Adames, who had 31 home runs last year, and that's it when it comes to the power department, right? I mean, nobody else that had more than 20 is returning, because the only other guy that had more than 20 was Hunter Renfroe. So, this could easily be the second best power bat in their lineup, depending on what version of Christian Yelich they get next year. And I do think he can be a passable defender. I think, though, in this first year, split time with a backup. The way this offense is, Contreras is going to be a DH. And again, it's going to be one of their best bats. So you don't need him catching every day, ease him into that. And I do think down the line, though, he can be a passable catcher for 162, especially if we have some strike zone adjustments and, some of the rules that we're seeing potentially being implemented here. But I do think Contreras can be more than good enough.
Yeah, and older bro is really going to benefit from the automatic strike zone. So you have to think that a younger bro is going to finish, or is going to benefit from the automatic strike zone. 153 games in his career to this point. He played 4 games in 2020, 52 in 21, 97 in his All-Star campaign this past year. Guy's got 28 homers in 153 games. So he is getting acclimated to major league pitching. And obviously, he's excelling. The RBI numbers are not necessarily there. He wasn't being put in very solid situations to drive in runs consistently. And he, frankly, wasn't getting ample playing time, right? 97 games in an all-star season. And he was playing some, corner outfield, right?
Yeah.
He was playing some DH. Like, he doesn't need to do that now. William Contreras, instead of being an afterthought and the 10th or 11th guy on the totem pole in Atlanta, is now the 4th or 5th guy on the totem pole in Milwaukee. That's gonna benefit him. That feels very Willy Adames-esque, where he became one of the offensive focal points in Milwaukee after being an afterthought in Tampa, and he really benefited from that. I know that Willy Adames couldn't see in Tropicana Field, but I also think confidence has a big thing to say in that. So I think that William Contreras is set up for success there. And I love the backup situation with Caratini. I know that Narvaez is a free agent, but I love the idea of a veteran switch hitter in Victor Caratini ready to spell Contreras.
Yep. And here's the thing is, Contreras demolishes lefties. He really did last year, 936 OPS. So, you're going to be able to mix and match, throw him at the DH spot, maybe even, you could still be thrown into the outfield if you really needed it. Obviously, they're fine right there with some of the youngsters that they have coming up who we're going to talk about. But, I really think they get a huge bat added to this lineup here for limited cost, right? They give up Asturi Ruiz, who they got in that Hader trade. And, we talked about how it's going to be a tough decision for them, right? Like, where does Ruiz fit in? Because, he's still getting acclimated to center field. I think he can be a good defensive center fielder. But, they've got other guys there. They've got Frelick, right? They've got Garrett Mitchell. They've got Joey Weimer. And then they've got the guys that are already there now. It made sense to make this deal for them. And I think it just kind of fell right into the Brewers' lap as a perfect scenario for them. And I think they've got to be pretty thrilled with how they made out in this one.
Yeah, 100%. And we were talking about the Ruiz situation. We can just dive into it right now. Like, there was no space for him in the long-term plans. So there was going to be no space for one of these guys. And to be totally honest, I think they identified the right guy. I think there is way more to dream on elsewhere. The other one that kind of flirts with that conversation is Garrett Mitchell.
And I don't think Garrett Mitchell gets you William Contreras.
I don't think so. So I think that they ID'd where they needed help. And they ID'd what they can give up, where they have this gluttony of riches. And so much of what we wanted to talk about, because Weimer plays like such a different game than Frelick and Asturi Ruiz. So it was never going to be Weimer or Ruiz as the conversation. It was always going to be Frelick and Ruiz. Sal Frelick, not only do we love because of the makeup in our conversation with him, but the dude stood on his effing head in AA and AAA. He was unfreaking believable.
Yeah.
And when you've got a guy like that with that type of makeup, you cannot move off of him. You have to put all of your eggs in that basket, and it feels like they are.
And, you know, when you go on the Oakland side, you know, why they would potentially maybe want to do this is on the Ruiz, you know, acquisition. Remember, they got Christian Pache. And I think the worst trade, and like I really do think the Olsen trade was worse. Which, you know, I think it's early to say that, right? Because the Olsen trade has had some time to kind of unfold a little bit,
And
but
Shea could be the franchise catcher, that kind of
that's
thing.
the
Yeah.
thing. That's the thing. But like just the value of Pache there, they swung for the fences, right? They were hoping, and they still are hoping, right? Like there's a 5% chance that you get a superstar in Christian Pache, and they were willing to roll the dice on that. But I think acknowledging that now with this deal, they get an Asturi Ruiz who is kind of the opposite. Like I don't know what his ceiling is because he doesn't impact the baseball enough, but his floor seems to be pretty high. That seems to be the consensus, right? Is like, okay, this guy has a good approach, 84% zone contact, doesn't chase much at all. Elite speed, is always going to swipe bags, is continuing to get better in center field. You figure he's going to be an above average defender out there. So, you know, we saw the numbers he put up in AAA. Exit velos are not fantastic, and I saw some things highlighted on by people on Twitter about his hard hit rate in AAA and at the big league level. And, you know, it's definitely worth monitoring. I think he can hit the ball hard enough to survive with his speed. And, you know, I think he should be a gap to gap guy. But, you know, to me, this is kind of the contingency plan, like the backup plan to Pache, who, you know, seems to be less and less likely to pan out as he continues to struggle at the big league and AAA level. I think this is them saying, like, hey, you know, we're acknowledging Pache is probably not going to work out. We don't really have any upper minor outfielders, especially guys capable of playing center field at a high level. And, you know, like, let's try to answer that position for now and moving forward. And, you know, Ruiz makes them better immediately because they didn't have a better option than him right now. And you know, between Pache and whoever else they're going to roll out there, because Laureano has been more in the corner. And I think Ruiz does help them now and moving forward. Again, we'll go through the rest of the deal because I know there's some other guys you are excited to talk about, specifically Kyle Muller, who I would it makes it hard to sell this trade, but I would say that Muller is probably the headliner, quote unquote. Then you also have right-hander Freddie Tarnick, right-hander Royber Salinas, and then, you know, Manny Pena is going to probably be the backup catcher there.
Yeah.
Anything else on Ruiz? You know, I think the ceiling you're hoping for here is you know, a high 200s average, a solid on base percentage because he does walk. He's not going to slug much at all,
But
but
he's
he's
going
going
to
to
steal
swipe
bases.
a ton of bags, and you hope he blossoms into a special defensive center fielder. That could be a really good player.
Yes, it could be a really good player. You're hoping that he is a healthy Mondesi in the outfield, right?
Yeah,
Fastest dude in
I think that's
baseball.
very fair.
Yeah. So, and that is a very valuable player. Just one last thing to tie it up. And I know that you don't like hammering this into oblivion, but I will hammer it into oblivion. Like, I don't think it clicks for many people just how bad Christian Pache has been in his major league taste.
Yeah.
115 games. He played 2 games in 2020, so those don't really count. He was 1 for 4. But 22 games with the Braves in 21, 91 games with the A's in 22. 115 games. This guy is slashing 156, 205, 234 for a 439 OPS.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking about the ship sailing on Kelnick, the ship is already in the middle of the ocean for Christian Pache. It's bad. And then in Vegas, played 41 games there, hit 248, 298, 389. That was a sub 690 OPS when you're playing in zero gravity.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. The other big problem is this was a guy that stolen bases were somewhat part of his game when he was coming up. 2 stolen bases, was caught twice in Oakland, 41 games, 1 for 2 in the stolen base department in Vegas. So, like, what are you really hoping for here with him? Because he hasn't shown you legitimately anything in the last calendar year.
Well, it's crazy. It's an 80 glove in center, right? Like it really is like that. Or at least a 70 glove in center.
Yeah, but those guys aren't employable anymore.
Not when you can't hit at all. And you know, he just turned 24, and you know, I've been sounding the alarms on Pache since, you know, 2019, because I just, you know, when he put up the 134 WRC plus and people were celebrating him as a top 10 prospect in the game, you know, I just didn't see it offensively. And I that's where I hate, like you said, like I don't want to be right about that. Like I hope it clicks for him, and you know, Braves fans at the time were rubbing it in my face, right? Like this guy's career. But I think it's very clear that he was even tinkering in AAA and trying to find it so that he could get back there, and it kind of compounded the issues. So I think this is kind of one last blank slate, try again, and see how it goes, kind of opportunity for him. And I'm interested to see how that goes. But he's got more pressure now at the same time because Historia Ruiz is ready to go, right?
And
Like
is
he's already
already
shown
better than him
he's
at
already
this
better
point.
than he is. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But it does kind of take the pressure off of the A's for this miracle that Pache pans out. And now they're playing with house money a little bit with Pache because, again, he could still be a superstar if he could just hit a little bit.
And
But
hindsight turns Langoliers into the headliner of that Olsen deal.
well, I said it at the time. That was
Yeah.
the one I was at. That's the headliner, and he is the headliner, and he's going to be a good catcher for some time for them. Kyle Muller, you got to see him a bit last year, right? This is a guy you got to see throw a little bit in AAA.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw him throw twice in the same week, actually.
I mean, he was spectacular last year.
Yeah, like I think he was 7 innings the first time, 8 innings the second time. Like, and that's what I love about Kyle Muller. And I'm not just talking about the good outings here, right? Because he's got 46 days of big league service time. He started 11 games at the major league level, has an ERA over 5. To that, I could say, okay, like let's panic a little bit, but I'm not going to, because he was not getting any opportunities because the Braves were so deep, even without Soroka, right? And Kyle Muller was competing with Ian Anderson and Huascar Noah and Bryce Elder and Tucker Davidson to crack the big league rotation. Think about that, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Fried, you had Strider, you had Morton, and you had, any combination of two, Odorizzi for a little bit. And you've got like the most loaded starting rotation in AAA baseball, and it wasn't close. You had all guys that could be 5s for a contending team that were fighting to be the 7 or 8. So Muller was under incredibly high stress when he was up at the big league level. Now, zero stress environment, Oakland, and he's going to have the chance to start every 5th day at the major league level. And I think what this guy does, the way he operates on the mound, is a very, very fun thing for a team to dream on, because I wouldn't be shocked if he was like 180 innings next year, because all he does is get the ball and pound the strike zone.
And I mean, and that was the problem in the big leagues is, I think he wasn't trusting his stuff because, like you said, he can pound the strike zone. He did it in AAA. But, you see it a lot with prospects once they get up to the big leagues. It's like, okay, these guys are big league hitters. They start fouling off your best pitch and they start nibbling a little bit, right? And I talked about that with Ken Waldichuk, when he made his debut. And that's another arm that I think is really exciting that they have in the fold here too. It's, it's not all terrible. But, when you're looking at what Kyle Muller can become, he's 6'7", 250 pounds, right? And he's got a fastball that sits 94 to 95, touching 6 and 7. He's got a pair of breaking balls that are really good, and the slider in the upper 80s is nasty. The curveball is good. He needs to spot it a bit more, and he's mixed in a change that is lagging behind that 4th pitch. But now he has a chance, like you said, to just kind of use it and just go out there and throw. And like if he struggles, he struggles, and just compile innings, pitch at the big league level, not feel that pressure of competing prospects and other guys breathing down your neck as you're, trying to prove your worth for a team that's trying to win a World Series, right? I mean, like, talk about trying to trust your stuff then. I think we're going to see, like you said, a free and easy Kyle Muller, and I think that's really going to help him. I think this guy, ceiling is probably middle of the rotation. I think, he's probably going to land somewhere as a 3 or a 4, which I think is a really good piece to add here with the control that he has. And I think there's a little bit more upside if he can blossom with the changeup and the curveball. But heck, man, if you get a middle of the rotation starter, I think you got to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I think you got to be really happy with it. And the floor is a guy that you can run out there as a sacrificial lamb that's going to give you 6 innings. And that's not a problem at all. Like, yeah, I think there are going to be some outings where he's just getting teed off on, but everybody's got to go through those, and they're going to fly so under the radar this year that I think he's got a chance to really compound confidence after good outing after good outing.
And that was inside. That's my one concern is, the slider's really good. And a guy that has 2 breaking balls as a lefty, how are you going to get righties out? Right. And, that was kind of his issue. He's a little bit worse splits wise against righties. And I think, the games where he is not spotting as well, That's where you're going to see the righties kind of get on him, and that's where you're going to see him, feel that pressure to use the changeup a bit more, find that curveball a bit more. And this is the perfect time to do it. So I think Muller and Ruiz are going to be everyday or not every day, I guess if you're a pitcher, but they're going to be contributors, in that lineup the entire year and on that roster the entire year. And those are two big league pieces that could be a part of Oakland's future. So at that part, I think they did okay. Where I'm frustrated is, if you're going to get those two limited upside guys, I'd like the Tarniks and Salinas of the world to have a bit more to dream on. I think Salinas is a guy that you can really dream on. But I would have liked a little bit more upside, but the Braves don't really have that.
Yep.
And the Brewers weren't going to part with that. So it kind of is what it is. And Ken Rosenthal, before we get into Freddie Tarnik and Royber Salinas, Ken Rosenthal put out a really interesting piece in The Athletic, which was really breaking down kind of, what the whole trade negotiations were like with the Cardinals and this A's team. And what it seemed to come down to was the A's wanted one of Brandon Donovan or Lars Nootbaar. And again, it kind of hammers home the point that the A's want guaranteed contributors, or at least the closest thing to it. The Cardinals said, hey, you're going to pick from Burleson, Yepes, Gorman, and one other prospect, maybe Graceffo. We want you to pick two of those guys, and then we'll mix and match. And the A's weren't interested in that. So it kind of shows you what the A's are looking for. But once the Cardinals walked away, there weren't really many other teams that were maybe able to kind of match this offer, which is crazy to say, but it seems to be that was the case. So, once we love to knock these deals, especially when it's Oakland, but you have to wonder what were some of these other offers, and were teams willing to guarantee some close to big league ready guys that can contribute kind of right away for them and have that higher floor. Freddie Tarnik is even a guy that, to a degree, has a higher floor, right? He did come up for, I think, 2/3 of an inning last year, but showed pretty well in AAA and AA. Between the two upper minor league levels last year, averaged more than 10 strikeouts per nine. The walks are something to monitor. It was right around 3.5 per nine, and it was a low fours ERA. But Tarnik's got a 94 to 95 mile an hour fastball that generates a lot of whiff, a really good changeup that I think is close to, plus above average pitch. And he's trying to find that third pitch between his two breaking balls, the curveball and the slider. But 6'3" guy, big arm, just turned 24. It's another guy that could be a back end of the rotation starter as well, and has the fallback of being a pretty good reliever.
Yeah, I'm not worried about this one. You know what I mean? Like, the A's have to fill out their 40-man roster. They have to. And we're at a point where they're looking to just add guys that are 40-man capable. And Freddie Tarnik has proved that he is 40-man capable. And he probably wasn't going to get a shot with Atlanta because, again, they've got all this starting pitching depth. So where do you get it? He's got a chance to start every fifth day in Oakland. And if that doesn't work out, he can be a swingman or, a bulk relief guy in the middle innings when games get out of hand. And we assume that a lot of games are going to get out of hand really quickly for the Oakland A's this year. So I think that Freddie Tarnik is going to throw some innings. And the light version of Muller is you have a chance to get your feet wet for an entire season of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and I think Tarnik's numbers are a little inflated as well, which is interesting because he had 2 blow-up starts, where he had 7 earned runs in AAA and then one where he had 6 earned runs in AA. But especially in AAA, when you look at those handful of starts, aside from the 7-run outing, 3 runs or less in every other start, and the vast majority of them were actually 1 run or less in those starts. So this is a guy that could be a solid back end of the rotation starter. And again, you're trying to fill out the 40-man. And that's how bad it is. That's how dire it is in Oakland. Instead of rolling the dice on, high risk, high reward prospects, they want to fill out the 40-man. I can understand that to a degree. They do get their one flyer in Salinas, who, I've watched this guy through the year. He caught my attention because he, if I remember correctly, had a couple 10K outings where I was like, who is this guy? And he actually closed the year out with 4 1/3, 10Ks against Bowling Green and High A. Salinas is a 6'4", 230 stocky guy, 21 years old, mid-90s fastball with ridiculous ride. And he's got a nasty, nasty curveball that tunnels off of that. So this is somebody that is kind of the X factor of this deal, I think, because I think we know like there's some variance with Muller and Ruiz, but the variance is either like, replacement level player or like slightly above that. I think Muller can be a little bit more than slightly above that. And I think Ruiz can be a little bit more than slightly above that. Tarnik is more in that, like, can he be a replacement level player range? Salinas is that guy that could, never make it to the big leagues or be a middle of the rotation arm. So,
Yeah.
I would say Royber Salinas is that X factor to try to, put this deal over the top. And I mean, man, this guy generated some pretty crazy whiff rates. In zone whiff rate of 28% last year for a pitcher that is spectacular.
Yeah.
Swinging strike rate of 18.6%. That'd be one of the best figures in the big leagues last year, and it was one of the better figures in the minor leagues. Command is a question mark. 13.6% of batters, but dude, he punched out 38% and still generated a 45% ground ball rate. When you're striking guys out at that clip with a riding fastball, but also still getting ground balls at an above average clip,
Yeah.
this guy could be really good. And if we're talking about data darlings, I think Salinas kind of fits the bill.
No, I mean, this kind of jumps out as the Harleen Susana of this deal,
I would
right?
say so.
Because it was in that Soto deal, it was okay. We obviously want Wood, we want Hassel, we want Gore, we want Abrams. Like Gore and Abrams were the high minors, ready, major league ready, top flight prospects. Hassel, AA guy. Wood, high A guy. And then how about Susana, right? It felt like it was, and then how about Salinas here? And I'm not sure what the Braves think of Royber Salinas, but
I can promise you they love him.
Yeah, like
I bet you this was hard, but like when you're trading Muller and Tarnik, obviously they gave up William Contreras, but when you don't have to deplete your system, and you only got to give up one of your like favorite, guys that you're higher on than everybody else, you do that in 2 seconds, right? Like you're getting Sean Murphy, and you don't have to give up a Michael Harris type prospect. You don't have to give up Vaughn Grissom even. Like, I think they love Salinas, and I think Oakland knew that. And this was probably the one where like, and Oakland's like, come on, man. Like you're getting Sean Murphy.
Yeah, it's Sean Murphy.
You don't have to give up much here. We're not asking for any of your recent draft picks even. Like, just give us Salinas. But to answer the double digits K kind of question I posed for myself, he had two outings of 13 Ks. He had a dozen, he had 11, he had 10, he had 9 3 times, 8, and then 7 4 times.
Damn.
So this guy, when he was on, man, like he was striking everybody out, and he's still 21 years old.
Damn. Okay.
So we're talking like plus fastball, plus curveball. We'll see if the third pitch comes along, and we'll see how the command comes along. But it's a really hard trade to fully conceptualize, because I think people get caught up with the Brewers, and I think also people get caught up with like the lack of top 100 prospects in the deal. But Ruiz to me is a top 100 prospect. Muller would be if he wasn't graduated, and Tarnik is a piece that's a 40-man piece, and Salinas has the upside of a top 100 guy. Obviously not the package you're hoping for, but I don't think it's as catastrophic as my initial reaction. It's definitely not great though.
Yeah, definitely not great. They could have done better, and I would have liked talking about 2 of those Cardinals prospects instead. But if John Mozeliak shut that down, then this might have been the next best option. That's
if you could get Yepes and Graceffo and then a couple fillers, would you rather that than this? Like, there's a legit chance that this group, accumulates more WAR with the A's than the other group. It seems like the A's are very risk averse, which is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Opposite. I would be the opposite when I'm rebuilding like this, but maybe they're looking at it like, we're probably going to relocate the team. If we have the baseline 40-man of young, controllable guys, if we get that new stadium, if we eventually move, like that's where we'll spend and make an impact. If they're not looking at it that way, it's, hey, let's field a roster, a baseline controllable roster. We're going to have some guys pop. We're going to have some guys disappoint. We pre-arb the guys who pop like the Braves do, and then we'll spend in certain spots, because the A's have spent in certain spots in the past. They're not like the Marlins and some of these other teams that never, ever spend. They have picked their spots.
Yes. Really interesting that they are going about it that way.